right. Well, my goodness, almost 200 people here today. This is amazing turnout. Thank you all so much for showing up. My name is Susan Lightfoot-Schempf. I'm the co-director of the Wallace Center and one of the leaders of the Food Systems Leadership Network. And we are working in partnership with the Institute for Social and Economic Development Solutions, ISED Solutions, in this technical assistance and support to both prospective and current grantees of the Community Food Project's competitive grant program. So really happy to be here with you all. This is part one of a two-part series on getting real and getting ready for the Community Food Project's competitive grant program, which we're expecting the RFP to drop for any day now. So we wanted to bring this series to you sort of in the lead up to the applications opening up so people can really wrap their heads around what this is all about and come here and learn like from some folks who have some real tried and true experience with this program to share our experiences and give you some tips for this application process. Just wanted to quickly give an overview. I know we probably have a lot of new folks in the room who maybe haven't been participating in the Community Food Project's Community of Practice that we co-host in partnership between ISED and the Wallace Center / Food Systems Leadership Network. Andy and Emma are here from ISED Solutions. You all give a little wave. Andy and Emma are the leads on this National Training and Technical Assistance Award in partnership with NIFA. So they're also a CFP grantee, just in a little bit of a different kind of function. And we as the Wallace Center Food Systems Leadership Network are working in partnership with ISED Solutions to co-facilitate these webinars and the Community Food Project's Community of Practice. So that's who we are. And I know there's a lot of you out there. We had 500 registrants for this webinar, which is amazing. And we did just like a quick analysis of what people were kind of coming into the room with. And it was really interesting. The majority of folks are here to learn more. You're considering applying and you've never applied before. So that was about 400 out of 500 registrants for the webinar, sort of identify in that category. There's a small handful of you that are just here to listen and learn, and that is totally okay. You're not planning on applying, but you just wanted to learn more about the program. Awesome. We're really glad you're here. And then we also have about 20% of the registrants who are planning on applying this year. So we're so glad that you are planning to apply. This is an amazing program, and we're glad that you're showing up for this session to learn more about what it's really going to take to apply. We also have a couple of people that are here who are current or past grantees that are going to be sharing their experience when we get a little bit further into the call. So thank you, Amanda and Bianca and Winona, for being here to share some tips and tricks with the rest of us. And there's also some folks that are here that have applied and haven't gotten it, but are going to try again. So want to celebrate you for your resilience and your perseverance. And your commitment to learning more and trying to be successful this year. So let's go up to just a couple Zoom housekeeping things. If you want to rename yourself and add your pronouns so we don't accidentally misgender you when we call on you during Q&A and such, please do so. Please remain on mute through the call if you're not actively speaking to the group, just for everyone's benefit and because we're recording and want to be able to share this later. If you can turn on your camera, we'd love that. Please use the chat, introduce yourselves, connect with one another, ask your questions, give some shout outs to folks. Please use that chat liberally. And also just a request to keep your AI assistants in check. And particularly when we get to Q&A, I would ask that we'll probably boot some AI bots out of the room because we want for folks to feel comfortable asking real questions and not feel like they're being recorded. We'll actually stop the recording when we get to the Q&A. All right, next slide, just quickly. Here's how this is going to go. Andy's going to give us an overview of the program, Andy Fisher. And Andy's been around with this program since the very beginning, so he's really got some great insight on the history, purpose, like kind of the function of this program, this grant program. Emma's going to share some examples of successfully funded projects, just to give a sense of like the kind of work that's being supported through CFP. Then we're going to invite Winona and Bianca and Amanda to share their experience with this program, with both the application and the actual administration of them, just so you can really get a sense of what you're getting into here. And we'll offer some opportunities for getting additional support, tee up the session 2, which is going to be in 2 weeks, and then open up the space for informal Q&A. So that's the plan for the day. And I think with that, Andy, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Susan, for that wonderful introduction. So I'm, like as Susan said, I've been involved with this program since the get-go. I helped get it launched in the 1996 Farm Bill and have been working on it off and on since then. So I'm just going to take for 5 minutes or so to give you kind of an overview of the program, what it takes to apply for it, and what the purpose of it is. The Community Food Projects Competitive Grant Program is the title. And Emma, can you do the admittance? I know you're doing slides too, but that'd be great. And so it's part of the nutrition title of the Farm Bill. It was first authorized in the 1996 Farm Bill. It's been in every Farm Bill since then. So the Farm Bill rolls around roughly every 5 years. It's included in drafts, the Senate and House drafts of the latest Farm Bill at double the money. It's currently authorized through this year at $5 million a year. It's in the next iteration of the Farm Bills, the Senate and House, again at 10 million, although that is not obviously legislation until that gets passed through both houses and signed by Congress. And it's mandatory funding. So that means we don't have to go back to the appropriating committees every year. So that's an important element because it means that the funding is once it's in the Farm Bill, it's there for 5 years. Can I get the next slide? The purpose of the program is fourfold. One is it's supposed to meet the food needs of low-income individuals. It's very much about, as the title references, it's about community support. It's not about charity. It's not about providing charitable food distribution to folks. It's really about increasing the food self-reliance of communities through kind of approaches that involve multiple sectors of the food system. It's about transforming the local food system through developing partnerships and collaborations that support local food, but also meet the food needs of low-income communities. And funding is also available to meet, as it says, to meet specific needs related to equipment necessary for projects, planning for long-term solutions. So again, longer-term efforts are possible, as well as innovative marketing. So what a lot of groups do are marketing projects that connect farmers and consumers. Next slide. And just some quick details. So there's 2 types of grants within this program. There's what we informally call an implementation grant, or is called a community food project grant, and there's planning grants. The community food project grants are probably what you're thinking about when you think about this program. They're about, again, developing on-the-ground projects in a specific community. Statewide projects are generally frowned upon. Multi-community projects, if they're geographically adjacent, are fine, but typically you're not going to be doing 4 different comparative projects across the state or across the country. The implementation grants are available for 1 to 4 years. Most people go for 3 to 4 years, up to $400,000 over the course of the program, up to $125,000 per year. Planning grants are for projects in which you need a little bit of time to figure out what you're doing with, or if you're planning a specific intervention, say a farmer's market or a market garden, and you need to really get your ducks in a row to be able to do that. Or you can use those grants for projects that are more related to, say, developing a food policy council or doing a community food assessment, things that don't really necessarily fit into that broader implementation bucket. It's not a lot of money. Currently up to $35,000. Most folks do that over a year. USDA may be increasing that amount to $50,000. We won't know until the next RFA comes out sometime next month. Both of those are dollar for dollar match. You can use in kind or cash, but you have to match again dollar for dollar. So if you're asking for $200,000, you have to come up with $200,000 in kind or cash match specifically for that program. They are highly competitive. Last year, only 8% of projects got funded. That was an anomaly. Most years, it's probably about 15 to 20% of projects got funded. Typically, 15 to 20 are funded in any one year. It is a peer review process by USDA, by NIFA. So that means that your peers, your folks who know what you guys are doing, are there reading your proposal and making decisions, or making recommendations technically to USDA as to who should get funded. So it is highly competitive. You do need to submit a superior proposal to get funded. So with that, I'm going to pass it back on to Emma.
Hi, everybody. I'm Emma. So I think it's helpful to have some examples of what's funded through this. So I'm going to start by just going over some topic areas that are funded and break them down in some themes. Many projects do fall over multiple of these buckets and themes. There's a lot of intersection between the two, and they're broad categories, but it may help you to think a little bit about your own project and where it might fit in these categories. This is not an exhaustive list, but through looking at a lot of the grantees, these are kind of the most common areas that you will see. So the first one is food loss and recovery. So that's aggregation of potentially wasted food and then partnering with organizations and businesses to distribute this waste. You might see this intersecting with food hubs, which is the next category, or it might be the function of a food pantry that is trying to do some more long-term food security work. And then food hubs is the second category, which intersects with a lot because it can be a really helpful aggregation point. So it's any kind of aggregation of food and distribution. Again, it could be a food pantry, but it also could be a way that you're supporting local producers and buying directly from them. And then you are responsible for distributing those to partner organizations that maybe take SNAP or government assistance, or maybe you have a store yourself where you are selling directly to eaters. And then food production of prepared meals. We have a lot of grantees doing that. Business incubation, so this could be value-added products, or it could be, your project has some land or is leasing land, and you have small-scale producers who need a place to grow their food, and you're helping them get that access to land. And then I also would put community gardens into this category. It's maybe not market farming, but it is people producing food. Nutrition education is, I would say, farm to school. Cooking classes is something that's pretty common. And then food as medicine, which is a growing area that a lot of grantees are sort of expanding their work into. So retail is kind of a large category, but I've been finding it as farmers markets, farm stores, food co-ops, or CSAs. Any project that's working directly with consumers. So the important piece about this retail in the context of this grant program is it needs to prioritize accessibility for low-income people. So these retail spaces are taking SNAP, they're taking government assistance. That's a really important part of it. And then as Andy mentioned, there's the planning grants. And those are meant as an opportunity for organizations to do research in an area of concern in their community, to plan to address it. You can do community food assessment. Andy also mentioned organizing a food policy council. And then those grantees are eligible to then apply for the implementation grant, and they may move some of the aspects of their planning grant, maybe their findings or some action steps they want to take. They may develop that into an actionable project. So I think it's helpful to have a few examples of some projects. These are projects that Andy and I have been lucky to work with. I have visited one of these. I think there's some good examples of what these buckets can look like. So the first one is in Hawaii. So Aloha Harvest has a food hub, and they capture wasted food from organizations and businesses. And then they have a food hub that they aggregate it in, and then they distribute it. I think what's interesting about this program is that they sort of take a long-term and a short-term view, in the sense that they are addressing long-term food security by opening up a revenue of food, but they also are doing emergency planning as well. Being in Hawaii and facing challenges with climate change, they're really thinking about where they fall into this and addressing and planning for the events that could come and could disrupt food distribution. Then Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance, that's a planning grant. And I think they're wrapping up right now, and they did a community food assessment. They looked at traditional foodways in the use of a diverse range of fish, and how to revitalize the fishing culture that is often coming from indigenous cultures or a diverse array of people that are on Cape Cod, and what it might look like to bring back use of some of these fishes that are not as commonly used, and how that might actually improve the food security of the community. So they have had really a lot of success with their program, and now they are moving to potentially apply for an implementation grant. And then the last one I want to talk about and mention, because I think Regional Environmental Council in Worcester, Mass. is a really good example of a project that's really diversified, that has programming that's going across a lot of different areas and thinking about it really holistically. So they are doing a lot of job training for young people working on their urban farm, working throughout high school, giving them skills, paying them to learn the skills that then they can bring into their life. And then they also work directly in school. So they're working on getting children educated and access to soil and to growing food. And then they are aggregating a lot of this food into a small food hub, and also buying from some local producers as well. And then this is going out to their mobile markets and to their farmers markets, which are all really geared to accept SNAP, to accept some state subsidies. And so they're really addressing food security across a lot of different avenues, and also supporting the community in getting involved in food access. So I encourage you to look up these organizations. I think it's really helpful when you're thinking about your own application to look at examples of programs that have been funded and have really successfully expanded their programming because of this funding. So maybe take note of these and look them up when you have a chance. All right, I'm going to pass it back over to Andy.
Great, thanks for that, Emma. So I'm going to get into kind of a conversation or a little bit of analysis on, what do you need to do to apply for this grant? Is it worth your time? And as much as our job is to promote the program and to support it, support the grantees and the applicants, and we try to do that to the best of our abilities, but it's also, I'm finding the more I get into this that I find myself almost dissuading people from applying, kind of, and that's in some ways what this webinar is about. It's not about dissuading you. It's about going, is this really the right opportunity for you? Because it is not only competitive, it is a challenging application that takes a lot of time. And it doesn't do anybody a service, to be honest. It doesn't do USDA a service. It doesn't do you a service to put in proposals that aren't going to get funded. I mean, there's nothing, as I've been an ED for 20 years, and there's nothing that annoys me more than putting all the time and effort into a grant proposal that doesn't get funded. It just feels like a colossal waste of time. So in part, I guess I'm trying to help you think through whether this is a waste of time or whether this is really the right opportunity for you. So I divided this into three different buckets. The first bucket is, even before you think about, even before you get into whether we have the capacity to write this application, you should think about a few things. One, is there a project that you have in the hopper that you're ready to expand or you're ready to modify? You cannot fund an existing project per se under community food projects. You can fund a project that's new, that's modified, that's expanded, but just something as a continuation of what you're doing is not really going to fly. This program is very much based upon collaborations. You cannot do this by yourself, and you won't get funded if you just submit in a proposal by yourself. So do you have those collaborations in place? Given that the RFA is coming out, anytime in the next month, you're going to have 45 to 60 days probably to write that grant proposal. it's going to be hard hitting the ground running to write that if you don't have those relationships in your community in place to do that. Third, do you have the match? Again, what a lot of groups find is that they only end up applying for the amount of money that they have matching funds for. It's a dollar for dollar match. So do you have, if not the cash on hand, the grants committed, and they have to be committed. It can't be program income. It can't be, oh, we're going to grow $50,000 worth of kohlrabi and we're going to sell that. Doesn't work. It has to be committed. Or could you have the in-kind? Do you have the ability to track those volunteers and to get letters along this extent, to that extent? So, just some no-nos. Again, no existing projects, and please don't try to create the project on the fly. It's not going to fly. Next slide. Okay, so the next part is, excuse me, is, okay, so if you've gotten to that part and you go, okay, yeah, I think I've got a good project. I think I've got the partners in place. We've got the in-kind. Okay, let's talk about whether this is really a good use of your time and effort. Do you have the time to write a superior grant proposal? This is probably an 80 to 100-hour effort. And you're going to have, again, 45 to 60 days. So it's not that it's full-time, but it's going to stretch out the course of that time. What are the opportunity costs that you're going to incur if you write this proposal? What are you not going to do if this is on your plate? And, do you have the skill set? Are you a good grant writer, or do you have access to somebody on your staff or a hired consultant who can write a superior proposal? Generally, I find, as an ED, I don't like to hire development consultants. I don't find they can write as good a proposal as a skilled person on staff, but you have to work with what you have in your own organization. Yeah, so the next slide, thank you. So, along those lines, whether this is a good investment of your time, you think about, are there other sources of funding for this project? I've talked to a lot of folks over the years who are applying for this grant, and it doesn't really fit. And there's other sources that may be better. But it might be business sponsorships. It might be community foundations. It might be other foundations that are more invested in your organization or that are more invested in supporting your work in the community. But that, the Community Food Projects program, yeah, it kind of fits, but it's not really the right thing. You might have a lot easier go of extending those relationships, building those relationships again at your local level, and getting that, that money perhaps in smaller chunks than this one big chunk that's going to be a little bit more of a stretch to do. And then, this is the hard part because, it's getting to people to think a little bit outside of themselves. Is this project really a good fit for the Community Food Projects program? Take a look at the RFA and take a look at the purposes. Take a look at what's called Chris, and we can help you make those links of which is a database of existing projects. What's been a database of existing funded projects. So you can take a look at that and go, do I see myself in here? Is what I'm trying to do similar in some way to what's already been funded? And if it has, then you've probably got a leg up and you're probably in a good position to request funding. If it isn't, if it seems totally novel and it seems like USDA hasn't funded your kind of project before, it's not necessarily not going to happen, but maybe it won't. So really you have to really kind of step outside yourself and be very analytical and think about, is this project a good fit for Community Food Projects, or is this really a stretch? And then if you go back just real quickly, Emma, I would really recommend, if you're rushing it, if you're running short on time, you don't have the expertise in-house to write good proposals, you're not, the project's a stretch, I'd suggest maybe don't bother, and again, not to totally dissuade you on it, and not that those projects don't get funded, but if it's going to be mediocre, your odds are you're not going to get funded this year. I mean, it might be a good exercise. It might have benefits down the line. You might be able to submit that proposal to some other funding source, and maybe you submit it again in the next year, and it's just a learning exercise. But you might want to consider whether this is really a good investment of your time to write a proposal that's not stellar. So that is what it's going to take to get funded. There's lots of high priority proposals this year and outstanding ranked proposals this year that unfortunately just did not get funded. Okay, next. And then, the other bucket to think about is think about what happens if you do get it. Let's say you write your proposal, you get funded. So what's going to happen then is the money is not going to, your grant, well, first of all, your project is not going to take place or not going to be funded and not going to start according to USDA until next summer, somewhere between July and September of next summer. So you're really writing a proposal for basically 10 to 12 months in the future. So can you wait? Can you wait until the next summer for the money to be released? And the money will not come in one chunk. It'll be available through something called ASAP. So it'll be basically funding that's up in the cloud that you can pull down on an as-needed basis, more or less on a reimbursement basis, but not entirely, on an as-needed basis, and put into your project. It's not the kind of thing you're supposed to take all $400,000 at once. So you're not going to get a huge chunk of funding. You're going to get, funding that helps you implement the project on a quarterly or monthly basis as you choose, as you and your financial management team decides is legal and appropriate. You're going to need a good accounting system to manage a federal grant. You're going to need timesheets that track your time by project. You're going to need an accounting system that tracks your expenses by category and by class that can meet the needs of reporting for USDA. So you need to have that in place. If you don't, if you're a brand new nonprofit or you don't have those things in place, I would suggest waiting until they're in place, because it's just going to cause you a lot of pain and trouble down the line. Do you have the systems to track your outputs? You're going to need to know how many pounds of food you're growing. You're going to need to know how many people you're serving. You're going to need to know a lot of those things for your evaluation purposes. Do you have the ability to evaluate your project successfully? If you don't, I would suggest trying to develop those prior to submitting a proposal, or knowing that you're going to be able to develop those once your award is given. And then most importantly is, part of what a lot of grantees find is that once they get this money, it gives them the kind of an imprimatur of success, or they get, that they get USDA's sign of approval, and it becomes very valuable and very useful in getting other funding sources on board. So once USDA funds it, you'll find that other foundations or businesses or state government or local government will be willing to support you, because USDA has already reviewed it and said you're good to go. So you should be thinking about how you're going to leverage this award, which is not a huge amount of money these days. It's not as much as it used to be, really. So how are you going to leverage that for other purposes and to get other funding in the door? I think that was it on my end. We'll pass it off back to Emma.
Before we get into questions, I just want to say that Andy and I, part of our role is to support you all in your application process. This webinar, and part 2 as well, is to answer some more general questions about this grant, especially this first part, and to kind of get you thinking about if this might be a good fit. The second part, we're going to talk more about specifics of the application and do a walkthrough of the application. But if you've gone through this session and you know what you need is some one-on-one support, Andy and I are available to answer more questions, to guide you to the next step. So email me. My email is up on the screen, and then I will direct you to the best place to get that support. We do have application guides and materials as well that we've been developing, so your questions may be answered by that. We can just share some of those with you. We do have a series called Community of Practice, which we've paused for these 2 months to do, for August and September, to do these webinars. But they're really great for anybody doing community food project work, even if you're not a part of this program. It's around a different topic area every month. It could be land access or shared leadership, or ones that we have done. And I believe we'll be bringing that back at the end of the summer in October. So keep your eyes out for that. And if you've registered for this series, this 2-part series, you are registered for the second part. That is September 11th, I believe at the same time, 2 to 3:15 Eastern time. So please come back. That's going to be much more in depth about the application. So if you've gone through this one and you're like, yes, I think I am the right fit, then it would be really helpful for you to then go to the second part.
So we just have a couple of clarifying questions, Andy, before we kind of get into a little bit more about the program and hearing from a couple, like kind of a real talk grantee conversation. So there was definitely a number of questions in the chat just about this. Like you said, you can't get funding for existing projects, but you can expand an existing project. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because you also said it's not for startups. So there's just a little bit of like,
Yeah.
some chat action around
What
that.
is it for, right? Yeah. So first of all, when I say startups, it's not, I'm sorry, I probably misspoke. I don't mean startup projects, I mean startup organizations. So if you're a brand new organization and you have not pulled in any money before, this is the first thing you're doing. It might be a stretch. This isn't like the first grant you should write, is kind of what I'm trying to get at, because of its complexity. So that's that. Startup projects are fine. By USDA, if you have an existing project, you've always been doing, for the past 5 years, you've been doing this set of activities, I don't know, whatever it might be, say a market garden for youth, and you just need money to continue doing it, not so much. USDA is going to look at that as not ideal. The idea is that this is a one-time infusion of federal funds to get a project going, and that after that one-time infusion, the project is supposed to be sustainable. And we can talk about that separately. There's a bit of a kind of an unreality to that expectation, but that's what's codified in the legislative language. So project that's been there forever, you want to just keep funding it? No. But if you've got a project that's been going on forever and you're trying to take it into a different direction, you're trying to expand it into a new community, you're trying to, take the lessons you learned from that project and work with a different population, do it in a different way, yes.
Super helpful, Andy. There was definitely some questions coming up as well around match. And I'm going to suggest that we can probably get further into match in part 2 when we really get into like the application. But just, I think the clarification about having like not understanding the example of kohlrabi being produced, not counting as in-kind. So maybe just talk a little bit more about what it means to have like matching funds.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was being facetious about kohlrabi. But the point is that you have to have, when you get this grant signed off on by USDA, they have to have documentation of every single dollar of match, whether that's cash or in kind, and that comes in the form of letters from your organization or other organizations. Let's say you are operating a farm stand and you expect you're going to have $50,000 worth of produce sales in the next 3 years from that farm stand that can support your staffing and your other costs that would be part of your project. That's not going to work because that's an expectation in the future. USDA can't document that. They don't know if that's real or not. So that kind of program income of future sales or other expectations of income generation that you're going to have cannot count towards your matching funds.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And we have just a reminder, we have a good 15 minutes at the end of the webinar to get into more questions. So keep adding them to the chat and we'll be pulling them into a document so we can make sure and revisit some of these. But I also really want to pull in a couple of partners that are here who are current grantees. So folks who have successfully received this funding in the past, who have gone through the application process, who got the money, who have implemented projects, and hear from them. Like, what would they add to what Andy shared, some of this real talk about the actual application and the program. So Bianca Bachman from Riseboro Community Partnership is here with us. Hey, Bianca, thank you for being here. I'm gonna spotlight you. And maybe Emma, if you could help me find Winona Bynum, who is here from the Detroit Food Policy Council. We can spotlight her too. And we also have Amanda Turtle from Cowarack in Alaska. So these are 3 peers who've had this money. And I would ask y'all to just share, what did you get funded to do? And any tips on how you scoped your project to fit the CFP program. Here we go, Winona. And y'all can just jump on in. Winona, how about you? What did you do? What did you get funding for?
Sure, I'll go first. So we were funded to work on grocery stores in our community. So most of the grocery stores in Detroit are independently owned. So we have a project that we call the Great Grocer Project, where we work with those independent grocers, giving them technical assistance to improve, connecting them with community members so community members can voice their opinions about what's going on at the grocery stores and help them to be a better business. And also we rank them. We go out and we review each grocery store. And then we celebrate the ones that do well. So they literally get so many carrots if they do for each thing they do right. And we really approached it from the sense that they want to be good business partners and community members want strong businesses. So we were trying to connect those. Um, and a lot of what Andy said, I won't go on too long, but a lot of what Andy said was so true. You have to have those strong partnerships in place before you do this. So we had the Detroit Grocery Coalition formally since 2016, and we were awarded, I think, in 2020. So we have been working together, really formulating what we wanted to do, assessing the issue, and coming up with a good plan for it. And I will say, when I first became an ED, I was excited. I saw this and I applied on my own. And needless to say, it was not funded, and a lot of those pieces were not in place. So although I did get some good feedback from the reviewers, you really do need to think about what you have in place before you do this. This is really for a well thought out project, especially if you're going for the project funding and not the planning.
Awesome, thank you. Bianca, how about you? What did y'all get funded to do? And anything just right off the bat that you would add to what Andy had shared?
Sure. So I've actually been funded twice now at 2 different organizations for 2 different projects. But I've applied 3 times, but actually not really, because the second time I applied, we were seconds past the deadline. Don't do that to yourself. Don't work on something for months and then like try to make it perfect right at the end, and then the system crashes and then you have problems because they had no forgiveness for us. And we didn't get it in. What was cool about that time, the one good thing that came out of that time, is that it was very similar to what I ended up proposing a year and a half later. And so I had a lot of the learnings of that behind me. So the first project I got funded for was essentially like a community food and nutrition project. I will say I actually was trying to get my current work funded, but I was also trying to get my current work to the next level. Like, it was like, okay, we're doing like a cooking demo here and there. Now we're going to do like 40 and we're going to hire up all these people. And it's like, just like next leveling, I think is okay too, but you really have to be really careful about how you frame that. Too, I agree with that. The current project that I'm funded for, actually my funding ends officially 3 days from now, is called the Central Brooklyn Food Democracy Project. It is a collaboration with an organization called the Brooklyn Movement Center. The project is to essentially create in a neighborhood that's like been racked by gentrification over the last 20 years. It's to create a Black-led and Black-owned alternative food ecosystem. So at the center of the project is the consumer-owned Central Brooklyn Food Co-op. And that is being incubated by our partner, the Brooklyn Movement Center. And then Riseborough's role in the project is to incubate worker-owned co-ops all along the food supply chain that do business with the food co-op, with each other, and then with buyers outside the network. So yeah, it was a new project. It had been in development for a really long time. All the partners were in place. The story was there. And I think it's okay to go into it with the shell of your story, but you really need all those basic pieces there. Who are my partners? What am I trying to do? You should be able to answer that right off the bat. And the details of it kind of get worked out as you're doing it. And I don't know, am I allowed to share screen here?
I can give you the power,
This
Bianca.
is
Just a
my
second.
big piece of advice, but I want to show it to you rather than tell it to you.
You should be able to do it now.
Okay. So this, am I sharing yet? I'm not sharing yet. You're seeing a spreadsheet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is my work plan for the CFP application. You can see there's like 8 sections of the application, and you can see each section is divided down into every field, every piece of that section that needs to be done. And so like, what are the pieces to get to that place? What are the things we need to know about that? When is it due by and who's going to do it? Because generally it's not one person working alone. It's usually a team. And thank God for that. I mean, in my case, if I had done this alone, I would have, I don't know, quit, I guess. But this is really important. What we learned from that second time that I submitted too late is to submit early. So this work plan ends on Tuesday, May 28th, and the application was due June 3rd. And I think we submitted like the 29th or 30th, a few days ahead of the deadline to make sure. But yeah, I can stop sharing now, but in short, like, do that planning, lay it all out, get a real sense of what the thing is in front of you. There are a couple of materials. There's the RFP, which is, I remember, I don't know, there are multiple documents. I probably have them here. There's the RFA, and then there's like a writing guide that at least the people who were doing TA support for this years ago, the New England Sustainable Farming Project had a guide. I don't know what the current guide is. I don't know if ISED made a new one, but that was incredibly helpful. And then there's the USDA-NIFA CFP instructions. So there's like this instruction guide, as I remember, is like hundreds of pages, and it's like, this is exactly how you fill out this thing. And some of the other things are more like guidance and like, you should approach this way. You should think about this. What are some and are really, really helpful. You don't have to read every CFP instruction. You should look at the guide when you need to, but those other 2 documents are critical to read closely, and you should do that before making your work plan, and then make your work plan from that. And that's, I think, my big contribution is to go in knowing what you're doing generally. Even I'm thinking about a new CFP, and even this call has been really helpful to me to be like, oh, I gotta get it. I gotta see if I have it all together in time for this year. I might not end up applying this year because whatever. And then I also, along with that work plan, I created a folder structure to save everything into. I don't know if this is okay or if this is condoned, but I'm happy to like share information with people. So if you want to get in touch with me, I'm happy to like share any materials that I created during this project for your reference.
Oh yeah. Thank you. We'll definitely take you up on that, Bianca. Thank you. Those are really, really great tips. And really love seeing the work plan for the proposal for the application process. Like that is a best practice across the board, especially in these collaborative processes, but even just for yourself to keep yourself on track if you're the sole grant writer. So
One more thing to
Amanda,
add, sorry, quickly.
yeah,
This application, as you're hearing, is a beast, and takes months. But the management of this grant really ain't bad. So if you really think you have a good project, it's kind of worth a couple months of pain, I think, for the benefits of 4 years of sustained funding. That's
the ROI is good on this one. Right on. Thank you, Bianca. And we'll come back around for another round of input too. But Amanda, inviting you in, what's your CFP project? What were you funded to do? And just in the immediate, reflections and encouragement for the other folks that are in the call right now.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Tordal. I work for COERIC, which is up in Nome, Alaska. And COERIC is a longtime nonprofit. We've been established since 1973. So COERIC has a very strong core structure, strong core accounting department, which is really great to have that support. So that's my number one recommendation, is to have that support. And so COERIC isn't a new organization, but our project regarding food security and fresh produce was new. And so back in 2020, when we were looking at this project, COERIC had just become a co-manager of a farm, which is very unique in our region of Alaska. And so the whole project is about increasing access to fresh produce for all of our tribal communities. COERIC is a consortium of 20 different Alaska Native tribes in the Bering Strait region. So the community food project that we proposed and were awarded focuses on increasing production at the farm. So year one was, let's get some more equipment to help us do that, and help us plant more and help us get more produce going in this farm that we can actually use in the Arctic. And then year two was focused on looking at distribution, doing some workshops with the community to learn more about gardening and how you could maybe do that on your own, as well as maybe come out and help us in the farm as well. And then year three, kind of wraps everything up and is focused on distributing all of that fresh produce out to the communities. So we, set up a progression. Year one, we're going to do this. We're going to, increase our infrastructure, get things going. We're going to connect with community members. We have a partnership with our local regional health corporation, and they help us distribute the produce. And we also are collaborating with all of our village stores out in the tribal communities. So those are our strong collaboration pieces. And yeah, that's kind of how we set it up, as a progression over the 3 years. And we're in our last year, final month, actually.
Well, and Amanda, just thinking back to the application process, anything that you would, emphasize as people are wrapping their heads around this opportunity and whether to apply or not to apply?
Yeah, I think thinking about your team is huge. Who's your project leader? Who's going to be doing this work? And are your goals achievable? So making sure that your objectives make sense, not only to the person who's reading the application on the USDA side of things, but also to you. Like, can you achieve all of those goals you're setting out for yourself? You have to make them attainable. So that's my number one recommendation, is just really make sure you can hit those goals, because you can always go above and beyond, but it's kind of hard to say, oh darn, we couldn't make it. So that's my number one advice, I think, is just make it attainable.
That is such an important point, and something that we've talked a lot about around some of the other grant programs like local food promotion program, regional food systems partnerships, et cetera, is remembering that this is an application to the USDA. You're not applying to a philanthropy, for example, like a private foundation, where oftentimes we feel like we really have to sell ourselves and overpromise. I think one of the things that the reviewers do with these grants is making sure that the work plan and the budget really sync with what folks are saying that they're going to do. And those reviewers are people like us. And we know we will look at it and be like, that's not enough money to do those workshops. or they're going to do 50 workshops in 1 year. Like, ain't nobody doing that. So, remember, like, it really is about syncing up, as Amanda's saying, like objectives with the budget, with the work plan, and that those things really make sense and are practical, achievable, and attainable. Really, really great guidance that y'all gave, as we have Winona and Bianca and Amanda, just opening the floor if there's any other recommendations that you want to give before we kind of shift over into some open space for Q&A.
I think just the only thing, again, the networks, the collaboration, you got to have that, and it has to be real. And you have to make sure if you have community partners that they are recognized, that they are like they're a big part of it, that it's not just that they're being compensated as well. So, and that all those numbers make sense.
Yeah, thanks, Winona. All three of you really hit on the collaborations and partnerships that you had in place already and how you were able to activate those in this project. You weren't building those through this project.
A couple more thoughts along with a question, actually. So, one is that the way that this grant defines goals, objectives, outcomes, activities is very specific. So learn that language is my advice there. Like, lots of people, you can write goals in many different ways, but they want to see it a certain way, which is true about a lot of things in this grant. But just like pay attention to that. Another part of the syncing of stuff is actually like the balance of how money is spent. Like, I think, and I would love for Andy to chime in on this because I'm not sure if I'm stating it correctly, but in my memory, like, they don't want to see all the money go to salary. They don't want to see it go to all the capital, but they do want to see like a mix of this and that. So yeah, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, Andy.
I can try. In general, proposals that have a large percentage, like you're saying, Bianca, a large percentage that's going towards the purchase of a freezer. It's like that's not really that attractive. This isn't an equipment purchase grant. So we all recognize that you're going to need a certain amount of labor to implement any project. And, on the other hand, 95% is going into staff salaries. They're going to ask, well, don't you need any other money to implement your project? Whether it's travel or supplies. So it just has to be balanced. It has to be reasonable for what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to build a community kitchen and you need equipment, you need freezers or whatever, commercial equipment. Yeah, sure, fine, include that. But you're gonna need the other parts of your proposal to keep it funded. And if you can't get it from USDA, maybe you have to document that you're getting that money from other sources.
Yeah, and thanks, Bianca, for raising the point about the specificity of those terms for this grant application. Andy's got a really good breakdown of those that we're going to go into in part 2 of this series. So the follow-up session that's happening on September 11th, we're actually going to go through what had typically been the sections of the application. We haven't seen this year's application yet, but we're going to walk through those and really define terms and such. So please come back for that one. Amanda, any other kind of words of encouragement for folks here? And then we'll shift over into Q&A.
Oh, is that to me? You can do it.
Yes.
Don't be scared of it. So you got to try. Even if you try and you fail, you can ask for feedback and learn something from it. So.
Awesome. Thank you for that encouragement. And all three of you, thanks so much for taking time to share your experiences. And I mean, doing amazing work, very different work, each of these different projects. But I hope the folks in the audience can really tell, like, this is mobilizing community members to build a community-based food system. I mean, that is what's at the heart of all of these projects, but there's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing that. So, it's a really great program. And Ellie, I just saw your comment in the chat. It's also really small. CFP is one of the smaller grant programs for sure. And it should be 10 times this. And I'm just going to raise this up. It's because there really isn't a kind of mobilized network that's really supporting this project or this program. We need to do advocacy around it to increase it. So shout out for all of you that are involved in policy advocacy. Please get this one in your docket in terms of programs to advocate for, especially as we continue our conversations around the 2024 Farm Bill, which seems never ending. But hey, let's shift and talk about just other questions that are coming up.